Hello and welcome to What Moves Us, Episode 9. Not just Episode 9.
Christmas special!
Ding, ding, ding. Here's my bell. Johannah, I notice you're not wearing your Christmas jumper.
No, that's because I am meeting a client afterwards, so I didn't think it was appropriate, but I will do later.
And what would it say if you were wearing it?
Meet me under the mistletoe.
Do you have any mistletoe on you?
No, but figuratively speaking, I have. Imagine.
We also have a guest today who is...
David Watts from CCD.
And what's CCD?
CCD, we're design and ergonomics and human behaviour based consultancy.
Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be
You're not wearing a Christmas jumper either.
No, well,
Really?
as I said, I don't
Mince
own a
pies.
Christmas jumper, which is incredibly miserable.
I know, I did mean to bring my hats, actually.
The cake princess, where is my mince pie?
Do you know... I don't know why.
Speechless.
No, but do you know,
Speechless.
I thought about this yesterday. I did think mince pies, and that was about as far as it got because I got because we've been away for a few days. I've kind of got a bit out of sync in my organisation, and I just wasn't in the mood for Christmas yesterday to do some Christmas baking because I was sort of like, because I've got a whole pile of Christmas cakes that all need decorating for people, and I was thinking about, should I go up in the loft and get the Christmas decorations? And I'm going on a Christmas wreath making class on Thursday, and I thought Christmas can wait till Thursday. That's what I thought.
Right.
So, and I also, because I wasn't under pressure to do anything today and I've got a busy week, I just thought, no, I can't be bothered.
Oh, well.
Sorry.
We're not worth it.
I did almost though, you see, this is why I should have done, because I did almost go into one of the nice Indian sweet shops on the way here to get some Indian sweets because I was feeling a bit sweet, but then I thought, no, I can't be bothered to do that either because I was just in one of those sorts of moods. So I really do apologise, because we should actually mention that we're in second home. And there's a bit of history to second home, isn't there, David?
In what sense?
In the sense that what it was before it was second home.
Yes, so we're in this amazing building for people who haven't been here that was a carpet factory 5 years ago and is now this
It feels like
interesting...
what the 60s thought a space station would be like.
It's, yes, so there's a lot of, well, it's not actually glass, but and thousands of plants all over the place, and not a straight wall in the building, I don't think,
No.
apart from the outside.
That'd be too conformist.
That would be, yes. Yeah, but it's an interesting place to work.
And for those that don't know where second home is, it is close to Brick Lane and the Truman Brewery.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
So we are in the heart of the East End, and I think it's the first time we've actually been to the East End on our podcast journey.
Yeah.
So new place for us. Okay.
Getting more hip by the day.
So as it's a Christmas special, what are we going to be talking about today?
Christmas disruptions.
Or engineering and information.
Right.
Yeah.
How we all get home on time.
Wouldn't it be nice? And it was really fun because when we were starting to talk about this, I said, I should recount my story today. Because I've been up to Birmingham today to the High Speed Rail College to see the outcome of some Innovate UK work that Paulie and HS2 have been working on with the High Speed Rail College to build a digital twin. And I was running a bit late to Euston this morning to catch my train because my train from Brighton had been delayed.
Yeah.
But as we all know, I will miss a train to go and get a cup of coffee because I cannot get on a train without a cup of coffee. It's like it's a bit like I'm a driver or something, you know where you see them walking up the platform with their flask of tea and that, I'm like that. And the problem with Euston with all the work going on at the moment is there are not many places you can get coffee these days, so everybody is at a well-known chain because there is only one coffee shop, and I'm stood there and I have 10 minutes. I still have to collect my ticket and all the rest of it, but I've got time and I make it. I've got my coffee, I've collected my ticket, and I'm stood in front of that lovely huge departure board in Euston, and my train is delayed. Now I bought my ticket online and I'm getting reminders to go and collect my ticket. It is ready to collect.
Yeah.
But no information about the train, and I was on a booked service. I could only travel on one train, and there was nothing at all.
Did you book it from the operator directly?
No, I booked it from a new app called TrainPal,
Well, maybe they need to use the open data feeds.
and allegedly it's Chinese. Allegedly, somebody was telling me.
Does it use facial recognition?
I don't know about facial recognition, but it was a bargain. £22 returned to Birmingham
Right.
in the peak.
So are you saying there was no information, you weren't being told anything by the app, or you weren't being told anything in the station, or neither?
Nothing at all. So it wasn't until I looked at the departure board, and the only thing it had up there was I should have been on the 8:13 train, and it just had up 8:18. No explanation of what 8:18 meant. And I also thought it was interesting that they've removed the information booth from the middle of the concourse. So it was sort of like, so it was like, sort of like swivel head, what does 8:18 mean? Does it mean the train will board at 8:18? Does it mean it's leaving at 8:18? And then of course you come across your other dilemma, or you do when you're a lady of a certain age. Have I got time to go to the toilet now? Because I've got my coffee and I'm not boarding the train, but I actually need...
But where would you put your coffee when you're having the toilet?
I don't want to go into that. And that just brings up the
Sounds a bit like you got the service you paid for because you got a cheapy ticket.
I don't think it would have made any difference whether I'd have paid full price at £88 or whether I had the bargain basement. Because I was comparing prices with colleagues on the way back from Birmingham this afternoon, and I did have the best priced tickets, the most competitively priced.
So I guess that's the point about actionable information, that we seem incapable of or unwilling to provide information that allows you to plan, do anything, which I don't understand. I had the similar experience of catching a train last week that was delayed, and it was one of those ones where I think it was like 7:17, and then it says 7:18, and then when that passes it says 7:19, and when that passes it says 7:20.
Yeah.
And you just think, well, if you just told me it was going to be 7:25, I would have gone to the toilet or gone and got a coffee.
Yeah.
But because it's...
And that is the thing, isn't it?
not
It's
useful
about
information, is it?
information at the right time to enable you to make decisions about how you spend your time. So part of it is about, am I going to be late?
Yeah.
Or part of it is, do I do something else that's meaningful in my time? Particularly if you're in a rush and you're thinking, actually, I'd quite like a coffee, or I'd quite like to spend some time doing something else. But you daren't do it because you're not getting told anything. And how long have you worked in transport, Dave?
Oh my word!
Because you work across different industries as well.
Yes. So we work. We do a lot of work in rail, but we've worked across airports and ports and roads for the last 20 years.
So is rail unique in the fact that it's still as bad at providing information as before we had digital technology?
I'd argue with that. It's not as bad. I think our expectations are much, much higher of rail, because we were in Madrid recently, and on the way there the flight was absolutely not on time. There was no information. We were sitting at the gate at the departure time. You just assume that you're going to wait, and at some point you get on the plane. You might arrive a bit early, a bit late, but you just kind of know it's going to happen. But we've got our expectations of rail so high that we expect it to that minute.
But is it
you're right, there is a different expectation, because I think when you fly, and maybe that's, I don't know why, that's a good question actually, why that is that you kind of accept you've got a slightly larger, because you've got, I suppose you've got all of within your journey, you've got a bunch of other times that are all uncertain. So, if you're flying somewhere, you're fairly writing off quite a large chunk of time before and after.
Yeah.
Because you don't know how long the queue's going to be at immigration when you get there, and how long it's going to take to get a cab into town.
And you haven't calculated exactly whether you can arrive, get your coffee, go to the toilet, and get to the platform.
Yeah, because
and you're
you've
kind
got
of
a whole
proud
other
that you've minimised that time, aren't you?
So
you're right. Rail is slightly different, because we do work on a much more. I will turn up 2 minutes before, not 2 hours before.
Yeah.
Some people do. I mean, I'm quite...
By the sounds of it, you turn up at 1 minute and 30 seconds before.
I do.
Woe betide that coffee machine not be ready.
I do. But I think in some ways I'm quite irregular, because I travel so frequently. I think probably most people who don't, particularly people who don't travel regularly, they allow plenty of time to do their journeys. Because if you were to take my husband, he would never do what I do in terms of turning up. It was the first time this morning for a long time that I'd travelled at 6:30 in the morning from Brighton, and I literally run down to the bus stop to catch my bus. I'm leaving the house 5 minutes before I get my bus, even though I know it takes 8 minutes to walk there, because I know it's all downhill, so I can sprint. And I know I will make it.
Downhill being important.
It's very important. But I do make it. And goodness knows what all my neighbours must think if they ever saw me sprinting down the road. And I've timed it, and I time it to the exact. I know how long it's going to take me to get my coffee in another well-known coffee chain at Brighton Station. I know how long it's going to take me to get through the barrier.
There is a difference between commuter, high frequency.
Whereas I think research shows that most people travel, turn up between half an hour and 45 minutes before a journey because of the anxieties we experience when we travel. I have the same anxieties, but
for 30 seconds.
But I kind of, maybe I like the enhanced anxiety of am I going to make it or not, and just like the fact that I'm not, I'm going to be in trouble and all the rest of it. Maybe I just like all of that.
You've gamified rail travel your own way.
But
I think to go back to your point about is it different in other sectors, I think all across our experiences across all transport there is this I suppose challenge of how you do something that suits passengers versus what's the operational and organisational need. So I can understand in the same way that you get called to your gate in a time that suits them because actually they want you there so they know that they can control you and get you, particularly if you're flying low cost because they've got such a quick turnaround. They don't want to suddenly be boarding and they've got a 20-minute turnaround and find you're still buying perfume or having a beer. Same with the railways, I guess. If there is a bit of a delay, they don't want you disappearing off somewhere. Ideally, it's slightly different because they don't have to get your bags off if the train leaves without you. It is your fault. But there is always that challenge behind what the operator is trying to achieve, and that isn't always perfectly aligned with how we as passengers. And I guess that's the sort of difference. And I suppose we're seeing at the moment.
Do you think if they gave you? Do you think that they're worried then if you have all the information, then you would make your own decision to go away and come back 20 minutes later?
It might be to do with that, but there's something sort of fundamental behind the kind of. I think we often scratch our heads around the kind of the language of when something's gone wrong. Why organisations hide behind this kind of language of operational incidents, or they don't feel able to kind of explain just what's happened.
Yeah,
which kind of bemuses me really. Why you wouldn't just tell people? But I've not worked as a train operator to know. Well, we can't say that. Or
we generally don't know.
or is it actually? Yeah, they just don't. They really don't know.
Having sort of because I think there's having managed stations and having managed King's Cross during the whole redevelopment. I think there's two sorts of ideas there, because we did quite a big when it was GNER before the development started, and we realised that there was going to be issues with platform capacity. We did quite a big study into how we could turn trains round quicker, because we were going to be because on average we needed half an hour, and on some trains we'd have to turn them round in as little as 11 minutes, and the 225s at the time, they actually take about 5 minutes just to clear the platform before you could even start thinking about boarding them. So we use the airline analogy, Ryanair, in terms of how do you quickly process that, but and part of the conclusion there was that you actually needed to sort of like inform passengers what was going on, so you could take them on that journey, so they would be on that get set stage. Say that your train will be boarding in 5 minutes, so be ready at, because we used to do queuing then as well at King's Cross, which I think was a very effective way of managing crowds.
It's a wonderful passenger experience.
But people kind of liked the idea, because particularly when you go back to the fact that particularly on long distance operators who tend to be more leisure, irregular business travel rather than your commuting, people feel quite comfortable with being chaperoned in a way, because it gives them confidence that they're still moving on their journey and that something is happening, particularly if you're going to be announcing at a late stage. So if you're in a queue at 15 minutes before and you know that 5 minutes before you're going to get the announcement to go on, it doesn't get rid of that sort of that tension of all of a sudden I've got to rush for the train. But I think it does give people confidence, and I can't remember now what the other point was that I was going to.
But I guess that's what we don't do generally in transport is, I guess to your point, we don't know as operators the exact
and that
timing.
was the language.
Well, yes.
Well, sometimes I think operators hide behind that, because I think there are so many incidents that actually could be fitted into a category and you could sort of like give an estimate on them. But for whatever reason, we don't. And I think part of that is that the railway likes to run under a command control structure, which from an operational point of view, you want to consistently deliver the same thing every day and repeat the behaviour. But when you're moving into the field of user experience, customer expectations, command and control doesn't work very well. And I think probably technology is enabling us to move out of that command and control, but we're not doing it very well. But just going back to that language as well, I think part of that is also about, you kind of have, here's the operator response on one, whatever it is, track circuit failure.
That means absolutely nothing to me.
Precisely, but so you get somebody who says a comms person to try and explain what does a track circuit failure, and how do you then make that a language that everybody understands, and nobody really, you just end up with operational incident, or fatality, or whatever. What does all of this mean? And really, you want plain English, don't you? But how do you explain operational things? Because I heard a classic one this morning on Gatwick Express, because it was so busy because of the disruption on South West Rail this week because of the guards being on strike. The train was busier than normal, and so they decided to declassify the train, and half the train are looking around bemused, particularly because what does it mean? Just sit anywhere.
Yeah, totally. It's an interesting one, because I suppose there's one thing which is about what that says about an organisation, and that kind of whole tone of voice piece, which is an interesting thing anyway, around organisations kind of having a, wanting sort of authority, and therefore trying to speak very sensibly and not have a sort of human tone of voice. But I think that kind of that sense of knowing what's going on, I think is an interesting one, because I think how you communicate but also give people back that sense of control, because I think that's the thing that some of the work that we've done has looked at about where people feel anxious and annoyed around that, is that kind of feeling of out of control. And maybe it's a challenge to the industry, because I can understand at the moment that if you said, well, I can't give like a 5-minute countdown to when we're going to board the train or announce the platform, because we don't know.
Yeah.
But the challenge maybe back to the industry is to say, actually, that's what we've got to get to. Whether it's that or something else, we've got to actually challenge ourselves to find ways of saying, it's not, my example earlier of, actually, we don't know when the train's going to come in, so we're just going to keep creeping it out. Actually, we've got to be better at finding our systems, knowing it is going to be 5 minutes. And because then we can give people a feeling of control, because we're not just giving them this kind of
is that statement informed by other industries? work you've done in other.
I think we'd say we see the same in. So we've done work looking at in airports, looking at what's your experience at the gate, which is a kind of similar kind of moment.
Sit and wait.
Well, exactly, and whilst lots of people have looked at airports and done all sorts of things about how do we improve security and check-in, because we've known for ages that people hate those bits, the gate is the last bit of one of the last bits of the jigsaw that's still absolutely lousy, because you turn up, you've been told to get there, actually you don't really know how long you're going to be sitting there.
Yeah.
There isn't very much there to do. It's designed as a kind of a 10-20 minute waiting space, but you could be there an awful lot longer.
Yeah.
And there's just a bit like, sometimes you moan around about train stations about there's a bunch of staff wandering around and not telling us anything. Same at the gate, isn't it? You sit there and
You're always printing.
There's
You're
people
always
printing. Exactly, and he's like, what are you doing?
How are you
And you're
printing it
sitting
if
there
anyone's not
thinking,
on the plane?
we're supposed to be boarding now, and you're still printing and typing away at your screen, and you just think, and there's all this useless information about, please take a seat, and some
And
people are
quite often
standing
there
and
aren't
queuing.
enough seats, are there?
So it's this
Should
kind
I
of
be in the queue? Should I
chaotic
sit here? I
moment,
don't know.
which actually has an awful lot of parables with. Although I thought that was kind of a bit of an irony, because what you were saying earlier about different models of doing it. I remember with HS2 talking about how is there a kind of a gate model where you kind of corral people at the gate ready to go down onto the platform, which is a bit ironic if we're saying actually gates are not a terribly great experience.
Well, I think HS2 is interesting because they kind of have a different type of problem, because they've got long trains, big stations, lots of people getting on them.
Yeah.
So that's not just about the quality of the information that you're giving people, but also about efficiently getting people onto a train, because
Well, we have experience of that.
I often describe HS2 as it's going to feel a bit like sort of like Clapham Junction on high speed or something, because there's going to be so many trains, so many departures, so many people that you've got to, and it will only work if you efficiently do it in terms of taking people on that journey, but not just taking people on that journey, but actually making them feel as though they are experiencing something that is pleasant and actually doesn't make them feel as though they're being pushed along and nudged and going through.
Well, that's why when we did some of the original stuff about HS2, we had that concept of high performing passengers.
Yeah.
How do we get passengers to perform better? Yes, to help us to help themselves.
Yeah. And
it's
some
a
of
kind
that
of interesting concept.
Yeah. So what sort of things did you explore in terms of a high performing passenger then?
I mean, a lot of it I think does come down to information, but about, again, information at the right time. So I can remember us talking about how do we just, and it's kind of marginal gain stuff, some of it. So I remember us having conversations about how could we get people to get off the train faster and not get off the train, put their bags down and kind of wonder, where do we go now? So what information can we provide on the train, countdowns, pre kind of alighting wayfinding, so that people get off the train, so people are A, ready, and B, know where they're going before they even step off the train, or the train's even stopped. So there are a whole bunch of things that you can do, but you've just got to have an aim in mind, and then how you deliver that.
And that's quite an interesting concept, isn't it? Because if you sort of like bring that back to today's operations, there's an issue with train performance and capacity and that. Actually, if you passengers in control and they have the right information at the right time, do they become high performing, and does that make the system more efficient and run better?
Well, you could look at it the other way. I know when we did that first piece of work you and I did when you were at DFT and we were working with the catapult, and we looked at that trial that they did in the Netherlands about information on the platform, including where was busy and where the different facilities were on the train. So if you can use that, which I know more train operator companies are doing in this country now anyway, to look at loading and so on. But I thought that was a great trial of a way of visually expressing information in a really clear way. So actually you don't get a queue because everyone's trying to get on the same carriage. you've already got people automatically spreading themselves out, finding the empty carriages, and that gives you that performance benefit back again. So it is that how we nudge people, how we influence behaviour to help ourselves as operators.
Do you ever look at the busyness of carriages?
We have done. Years ago we've done work with DLR and on the underground, looking at it, various other pieces. I mean, we did work with HS2, just looking at kind of door configurations and steps and the influence of those on boarding time. But it's an interesting sequence of things that you've kind of got to get right to get that kind of boarding process. But I suppose we haven't done. I can't think of stuff that we've done that's more that kind of platform based, other than that review that we did.
Because I was just wondering if you'd ever used it as a passenger in terms of looking at busyness, and does that affect it if you looked at and thought, oh, it's quieter down the end, I will move down it, down the platform? Because I don't even know whether I particularly pay attention to it.
Well, it's not as, I would say at the moment where you can see it. It's not as kind of well. That trial I know it was only a trial in the
That
Netherlands.
was quite glamorous in comparison to what they're doing here, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a really full-on visualisation of a display that ran the length of the platform, basically kind of above where a screen door would be. So it was very obvious as you came onto the platform, which is, at the moment we've got, I suppose, information. The presentation is a little more subtle here, so it's quite easy to miss.
But we also, we're probably the wrong people to ask, because here when it's not consistent information. If it's on a departure board at one of the intercity stations, it's who's reserved seats, whereas on Thameslink it's who's on the train. So it's not
because that's also
you can't
about the
trust
type
the
of rolling
information.
stock, isn't it? Yeah.
So it's not consistent information, therefore you can't rely on it.
Oh, we're back to that word again, aren't we? Trust. Because that's part of the reason why operators don't give out information, because they want to ensure that you can trust the information.
Yeah.
But if you don't trust the information, if you don't trust what they're going to say is going to be right at the right time, does that lead to a whole distrustful relationship?
But that's why you have, during disruptions, why you have uncertain information where it keeps creeping, because they don't know when that train's going to go, so they can't give you a definitive departure time.
Some of that is about distrustful information, but also
some of it's because you don't know what the signal is going to put first.
Well, there is that, so you've kind of got a disaggregated industry. I think also some of it is that more than we actually realise, systems aren't integrated within the railway, so they're not talking to each other. Because I've recently spoken to an operator about how can we give passengers information when we don't even know ourselves what they're going to do, because they're not integrated, because of the whole legacy and everything. And I also think more of it actually gets manually updated than we actually think.
Yeah.
So I know that there are a lot of stations where, on your example at the beginning where you were saying, it just moves on. It's either because the train hasn't, that's making the departure hasn't gone over the track circuit.
Yeah.
And track circuits can be miles apart, so actually you don't know where they are within the system, other than they're between two track circuits.
Yeah.
But also it requires somebody within a station to be keeping an eye on it and to then just manually update, because I think we've all been stood on a platform where it's said it's on time, but actually the time has gone, and it's because it requires a manual intervention. So digitalisation of the railway is probably years behind where it should be.
But again, I don't think that's, to your point earlier, Liam, about not beating ourselves up, I don't think that's clearly not unique.
No.
We look at, when we talk about trust, we always talk about, the kind of variable message signs you see on motorways of saying, there's congestion coming up, and you keep driving and don't find anything, and all of that just leads to think, you don't respond to it because 9 times out of 10 there's nothing there, and you just think,
is that why
is this some system
you
just
ignore
making
the
it
speed
up?
limit signs?
I often wonder on the motorway should you follow those or not, because I kind of go halfway between.
I know what they're trying to do, but at the same time,
there will be congestion if you don't follow this.
It's trying to get a kind of behaviour across a bunch of people that will mean there isn't the congestion as you slow people down and smooth the movement. But we've all seen those signs. So it's not unique to the railways, but it is. If you want that confidence, and I think there's a difference, I suppose, between information during what we're talking about really, which is the kind of day-to-day perturbation, as opposed to when it all goes completely pear-shaped, and it's a much bigger. I'm not talking kind of major incident, but I'm talking a bigger kind of failure that's hitting across a number of services, when that information can be then harder to deal with. I think when we were talking a few weeks ago, I was talking about my experience at Liverpool Street when there was some flooding, which stopped a whole load of services. There was basically nothing going out of Liverpool Street. And what was frustrating in that was not just being told just wait on the concourse, and you just thought, for how long? But actually there was no kind of joined up information, because what they also could have usefully told me was that actually that flooding was affecting the tube next door as well. So it wasn't worth trying to get the tube over to King's Cross in my case, because I wasn't going to get there by tube. But
and I guess
it's that kind of view of the world in your little railway bubble, and actually as passengers we're now starting to integrate and use all of these other channels to think, okay, what are my options? Look on Twitter, but I might be looking on City Mapper. How do I get home in a different way, on a different line? What's Uber priced at the moment? But as an industry, we're not. And maybe that's a challenge. It's too hard. But
can I find a buddy to share an Uber with?
Who knows? But we're thinking. In that example, stay on the concourse.
And but that advice kind of hasn't changed.
Or should I get a hotel?
But
just stop.
It's interesting though, that advice hasn't changed though in that sense, has it? In terms of what you get, because going back 20 years to King's Cross, stood on the concourse, in major disruption, and somebody says to you how long, and I quite often used to say I'd suggest go and have dinner somewhere and come back about 9 o'clock or something, and it'll probably be back up and running by then. And it's those types of things. And I think, what was that information that was being piloted up in Manchester, where they sort of had information that said wait on the concourse, or you've got time for a brew or whatever. I thought that was quite amusing, because it was sort of like you've got time to go and get your coffee or whatever. So I thought that was quite amusing. But say we've got a blank page, and we were designing the user experience to make sure they had the right information. What sort of thing would we be designing?
I think, firstly, the expectation these days is it's coming to you across a bunch of different channels. So it's not just a kind of single voice that you're accessing. I think it is. I suppose the other thing that we're seeing across all sorts of things is that kind of personalisation. And how do I make that wider kind of view of the transport activity relevant to me and what I'm trying to do? And I think we're kind of at an interesting moment where that's being acted upon across all sorts of different areas and different sectors. So that kind of personalisation challenge about how do you stick that into your day and make a decision and understand the options across your journey and your context, I guess is a kind of a challenge for how we would design something like that. But as I said earlier, I think a lot of that comes down to a kind of a clearer drive to the industry to say, how do we turn this upside down and think much more from maybe for your blank sheet of paper we've got to kind of throw away all the legacy stuff. I know we can't really, but in an ideal world, and if you could redesign it to say, actually, what would I want to know at this point in time? I'm not interested in stuff. The point about kind of trust, I think, is a really interesting one, because then it does take you into do I want to be given a piece of information? If I was told you've got half an hour, go and have a cup of coffee or something, and then you were sitting there and you were looking at your app and suddenly the train was leaving, after 10 minutes.
And that's the anxiety, isn't it? I'm not leaving because I don't trust you.
Yes. So to deliver that kind of service, yes, the industry has to be in a position where our data is better and we know it will be half an hour. Now, clearly in major disruption, that's difficult because I guess you're trying to anticipate how long it's going to take to fix something. And we're not quite sure how long it's going to take. Suddenly maybe it's fixed and we've resolved it and we can get things back again.
And some of it's a lot more complicated.
Of course, yeah.
Because when I was saying about speaking about systems integration, some of this is as simple as the trust system is telling you have a train.
Yeah.
And it's telling you it's in the platform and it's ready for boarding. But what it's not telling you is, does it have a driver and a guard, for example, or does it have the operational staff needed to maintain it? So actually the signal box might actually give up the train to say, yes, it's ready to board, but then you're sat there on the train and it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And it could, because there's no mismatch, and they're two systems, one's held by the operator, one's held by the infrastructure owner.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and that needs to, so that comes back to those legacy systems. It all needs to join and integrate in together.
Yeah. I suppose the other thing, that if you're really thinking about, yes, your ideal world, I think that challenge of more significant disruption and how organisations, I know all the organisations have their contingency plans and so on, but how you can mobilise that more rapidly. How often do we hear there's a replacement bus service and people saying, it's absolute chaos, there's no staff there, it's, it's an absolute bun fight to get on the bus, and it's just absolute chaos. And actually it's not just a hideous experience because you're 2 hours late because the trains aren't there. Actually the replacement is almost, not worse exactly because you do get there in the end, but is a pretty hideous experience. So I think there's a really interesting challenge to say, could you rethink how you could do that? Clearly mobilisation is a hard challenge. Bus service being an obvious one, where do you get the buses from and how do you do it? But I think there's something there. I mean, we talk a lot with a lot of the people that we work with about how do you go kind of overboard with your experience when you've got a kind of moment of pain. And you do hear lots of really nice stories about, okay, it was really bad, but they came around and gave away free water, or they did something to try and recognise that this was a painful moment. And I think that does buy you something.
And that's interesting, because I was thinking in terms of the presentation that we did, of how you make the security process better at Schiphol when they were looking at the nannies.
Yeah.
And could you do something similar to that during a bus replacement service? I mean, sort of like, if Mickey Mouse was running bus replacement, what would he do?
Yeah, you'd have someone there serving, bringing out cups of tea while everyone was waiting in the line.
Yeah.
You'd have some organisation out there, so it wasn't just a mass of people. You might have to throw some staff at it. It's not simple, but thinking how might we achieve that and how might we do that is always, I think, in these things the first step, because if you don't even make that step to actually think how do we go beyond, what could we do,
I don't think that.
But it's nice. I like that. Yes. What would Disney do if they were doing a bus?
I don't think though operators really think about it. Well, it's like MSEKYMOUSE.
Well, we did it. We spoke to an airport recently, and we said, what if you took Claridge's and asked Claridge's to run security service for a day?
Would I get sandwich and tea?
Oh, probably yes.
Or actually maybe a gymlet, because it would be that time of day.
Whatever it might be, but sometimes that thinking about parallels and how might a different sector or a different organisation deliver a service that you're delivering is a really interesting question and a really interesting way to kind of reframe the problem a little bit.
Cool.
I think that would be probably, I mean, if I was to take away a conclusion, that would be what I would say is actually think about how other businesses would deliver it, because it does give you a different perspective, doesn't it? And actually it does allow you to frame the experience maybe a bit more, because I don't think anybody thinks about a bus replacement service in that sense. It's just a question of you're going A to B and we're getting you A to B. And I think going back to Liam's earlier point about customers' expectations, they are higher, and we do need to think about how we match those expectations, because we don't expect to go A to B anymore. It is, everything is an experience, isn't it, whether it be good or bad.
Yes. Cool. Well, I hope you have a good experience for your Christmases. Bringing us back.
So thank you, David,
It's a pleasure.
and Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas.